So, hello everyone, good evening or good morning, depending on where you are attending from. I sent my greetings from Germany, but I know that we have guests from many different countries, which we are very happy about. My name is Margot Molkenbohr. I am project manager at the German Prevention Congress, and I'm your host today. So welcome to our webinar on the topic of cutting crime impact, the ProMIS tool, project monitoring and impact support for CP-UDP, which stands for crime prevention through urban design and planning. And I'm very pleased that we have over 50 registrations for today's webinar. I see that there are still people coming in, and yeah, this number of registrations shows that urban crime prevention is of interest to you and relevant to your work. Unfortunately, the 50 attendees, cannot see each other, but who you can see are our experts in this field of CP-UDP and CPTED, who will be speaking to us today. So a warm welcome to you. And at first, I would like to introduce Dr. Umberto Nicolini. He's an architect from Italy and director of the Laboratory for Urban Quality and Security that provides research and consultancy as well as training in this field. And Umberto will start with his presentation and introduce us to the topic for about 20 minutes. And he will talk a bit about the history and the relevance of CP-UDP, and also presents some case studies. And afterwards, we will hear from David Maher. Welcome to you. He is an architectural designer and is also very experienced with over 18 years working in this field. He works for Design for Security, which we will hear more about later. This is an urban crime prevention consultancy within the Greater Manchester Police. They are also partner in the Cutting Crime Impact Project, short CCI. And as part of this project, they developed a new tool called ProMIS that supports the work of the Design for Security team. And that is what David will present us today. And last but not least, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Dagmar Heinrich. She's also working on the CCI project at the University of Salford and will be moderating the webinar today. And before I hand over to Umberto directly, I have just some technical advices. Firstly, the webinar will be recorded. And secondly, we are very happy to receive your questions and comments. Unfortunately, as I said, you do not have the opportunity to join in with a micro or camera, but we invite you to ask your questions in the question field. Dagmar will read them and discuss them with the speakers at the end. And with that, I hand over. The floor is yours. Umberto, please.
Thank you, Margot. Welcome, everyone. And thank you for the opportunity of this presentation and being a guest in the CCI project. And my name is Umberto Nicolini. And a little sorry I can't see you, but you can see me if I look in different directions, because I have several screens to control the presentations. And well, it's quite strange to be considered as an old fox or a memory of CP-UDP. I'm only 46, so actually it's quite strange. Anyway, I was involved in how design of space can influence security very early in '94. And today my task is to make a short presentation about, very short because history is long, about how we came to the point that we are now with tools that we use to assess space on a security point of view. So I will start my presentation. I lost the tab. Okay, share screen one. Okay, could you please confirm me that you see my right monitor, my correct monitor? No one's speaking,
No,
so
to be honest, we can't see your screen at all. Maybe I could.
now you should. Now you should.
Perfect,
Yeah.
thank you.
Because I have chosen the monitor, but I didn't press play, so okay. Now it's better. So, space and security. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the concept of CP-UDP or crime prevention through urban design and planning, or CPTED, or environmental crime prevention. So, to put all of us on the same ground, I will just make a couple of statements. The first one is a fundamental one, is that how our cities are designed and used can influence in a very definite way their level of safety and security. So space can contribute to make places safer, but can contribute to make them much less safe. And the second important statement is that the active role, this active role of space on safety acts on both aspects, the real safety of place, so the crime rate, and the perception of safety. And personally, I do believe that in our current society, the second part is the most important. But we could discuss for a couple of years about that. So what we are saying is that basically a good organization of urban spaces, and with a good organization, I mean a space that is designed according to specific rules, design rules for safety, can increase spontaneous surveillance. And we will see why spontaneous surveillance is so important, can increase and enhance the sense of belonging. So how people feel that the places, especially public spaces, are their own spaces. How a good organizational space can contribute to diminish the sense of insecurity and fear into the citizens, but also a good design space can reduce crime opportunity and can support the action of the police forces on the law enforcement in general. So currently, after decades of work, we do believe that to tackle security issues, we have to work on three separated but integrated approaches. And the two traditional ones were the so-called institutional approach, that means laws, police, tribunals, courts. The social approach, who is oriented to understand the causes at the base of crime and security problems. And last but not least, the environmental approach. That means to work on our space design to reduce the impact of crime and fear. These things are, I would like to have an audience behind me to see your faces, but anyway, these things are now quite acquired. These concepts are quite accepted, but quite, not totally. Especially among my colleagues, architects, it's very difficult to introduce this kind of concepts in their practice, and we will see how, and we will see why we should do it. And we don't have time to make a history of the discipline. I would like just to talk about one or two persons, important persons. The first one is this beautiful lady. Her name is Jane Jacobs. Jane Jacobs was not an architect. She was not a planner. She was not a designer. She was an activist, a city activist, and then economist, and wrote a beautiful book that I suggest to every one of you. It is titled The Death and Life of Great American Cities. There is one sentence who is our big guideline when we work, and this is it. The first thing to understand is that the public peace, the sidewalk and street peace of cities is not kept primarily by the police, necessary as police are. It is kept primarily by an intricate, almost unconscious network of voluntary controls and standards among the people themselves. In this sentence, you can find all the philosophy of CP-UDP and all the framework that we're working in. So what happened in my late year of university? I met another woman who at that time just came back from the States, and she had been working with Oscar Newman, who was one of the founder of the discipline, and she was trying to bring back to Europe, to Italy, and to Europe the environmental crime prevention concepts. And that was Clara Cardia, Professor Cardia, who has been one of the many actors of CP-UDP. Actually, the terminology CP-UDP was invented by her for a cost action. And we started trying to develop methodology to evaluate, to assess projects under security point of view as architects and planners. And by chance, one of the first action we did was to start looking what was going on in Europe on this topic. And the first experience ever was to go to Manchester to meet a police officer. His name is Mike Hodge, who at the time had just founded a very innovative office under the Greater Police of Manchester, and the office is called Design for Security, and I think that David later is going to talk much about it. And it was a shock because before that, no one in Europe has ever thought about introducing crime prevention topics into design and planning. And how did that happen? Well, it happened. I will show you how it happened, and another European experience, France, to make a comparison. Well, everything started from a law that people from the UK probably would know much better than I do, that is called Crime and Disorder Act. Crime and Disorder Act, under the Section 17, makes a kind of revolution especially from an Italian point of view. In 1998, the Crime and Disorder Act gives to every local authority the duty of security. That means that not only the police, like traditionally intended, not only the police is responsible for tackling crime and fear issues. And these things open the road to a new idea of the approach to security. And so given that responsibility for prevention of crime is given to all public entities, public bodies, the central government, through the minister, provides, well, actually, I probably should say provided, because things have changed a lot. I don't know the last evolutions. A lot of local training, skills, toolkits, a lot of manuals, handbooks, and guides. And what happened is that in the city of Manchester, thanks to Mike, it was established this revolutionary idea of open inside the police an office dedicated to evaluate design and architecture and planning projects under a safety point of view. So the process is quite straight, given the responsibility to the local authorities. We have an initiative by the police and the creation of a specific office that is called Design for Security. The result was to implement the mandatory assessment of new projects for all new projects of construction in the city. Basically, the product of this, the tool for this assessment is called Crime Impact Statement. I'm talking about the initial phase, so then we have all the evolutions. The Crime Impact Statement is an official report that is compiled by Design for Security. I mean, Design for Security provides support for the designers who are not trained, and that's one of the big problems I'm going to talk about. And this report is, together with all the planning permission or building permission, is going to the commission for evaluation. So if you don't have a positive evaluation of the crime impact statement, you don't get the planning or building permission. It is something totally new and very strong in the process of building our cities. Basically, at the very beginning, the crime impact statement is applied in 4 phases. One is the diagnosis of the safety of the environment. The second one, so all the surroundings. The second one is the support to this design phase. This is critical. We will compare with the French situation. So the Design for Security Office is able to provide architects and planners with the tools to make better projects under a security point of view. Then there is a project verification. So after the support, there is a check if the project is improving or is critical for security of the project itself and for the surroundings. And then finally, the Planning Commission evaluation. So what we are going to see later is that now everything developed, and there is the need of new tools, including a tool to evaluate these assessments and to keep them together in a framework. But that's not my part of the webinar. What happened in France? I've chosen to present you about the French case because at that time they were the 2 only countries in which there was a kind of mandatory assessment of projects. Now some other countries are followed, but these were the really 2 beginners. So in 1995, the situation is totally different. You know, the French regulations are very top to the ground. So a new law in 1995 decided that in the whole country it was mandatory to perform a crime assessment for some specific projects. What happened? That it was so complicated that it took more than 10 years to make the step from the law to the application. 12 years actually. Only the city of Lyon, and I will show you a case study of Lyon, anticipated the norm and started in 2000, 2002 with mandatory assessments. What are the differences? First of all, the evaluation assessments are, and this is still like this in France, the evaluation assessment is compulsory in cities with more than 100,000 inhabitants and for very large projects. That means projects with a very large surface or settlements with more than 1,500 persons, or in some specific risk zone. So you can understand that the evaluation is spot into the country, is not applied in all the country. The process is quite similar at a first glance. So there is a diagnosis. These studies are called Études de sécurité publique. So a diagnosis of the urban and social situation and context, a project analysis, and some proposed measures, and finally the evaluation. But what is really different is that in this case, everything is left to the designer or to the owner of the space, of the land. That means that in lack of a specific training of designers, and that is the big problem that we are still facing now, the Études de sécurité publique have the risk of being stereotyped with ready-made solutions and not with a real understanding of the crime impact of the project. So this was 15 years ago the main framework about urban crime prevention in Europe. What has changed? Not much. Not much, because despite all the efforts and despite some new regulation. There is a CEN unification technical report that now is the ISO standard, and the handbook produced by the European Union to apply this concept. Despite that, only limited cases are put into reality. In the UK, Manchester was a brilliant star, but currently is an isolated case. Only a few small cities tried to apply the same tools, but it's not generalized. And in France, we still have the situation in which for large projects, the assessment are done, but their contents are quite weak. And more than that, they are just in very few projects. So, what shall we do? Of course, if we all agree that it is important to tackle security problems also with these specific tools, because not everybody agrees, and we can discuss in questions, there are some preconditions that I will go very rapidly through them. One, and this is true for every local situation. The first one is that we need more sensibilization. We have to promote the awareness that how we design space is a critical aspect of the future security and perception of security of the citizens. So the basic concepts should be clear for all the actors involved in the urban changes. Currently, as experts of design for security, we are really only a few persons in Europe, and we continuously meet in the same places, and we have to go out of this ivory tower and to make this culture common. Second, it's important, it's fundamental to develop a specific technical culture. Nowadays, the principle of CP-UDP are not topic and not a subject of any architecture faculty or planning faculty in Europe. And that's really a shame, and it's the main problem of our discipline. The third one, training and updating. Of course, there should be a higher learning level. So in order to have CP-UDP specialists able to support designers and planners. I would like to share with my friends at Design for Security how easy it is for them to find people to discuss and to find people to come to work in evaluation of projects. Then project support. Project support is fundamental. We cannot think that all planners and all designers will be able to introduce spontaneously and by themselves CP-UDP concept in their projects. So in integrated approach to safety, every public authority, every city should be in a condition of provide them with the support to projects. And then we have to think about a gradual approach. We cannot, like it happened in France with the results that I told you, we cannot think that we can start from the very high level and say, okay, from tomorrow, in all the countries, every project must be evaluated and to be approved. No, the first action is to make promotion, and the second can be to put it get it mandatory. And the last one is to maximize coverage. It is demonstrated that if we don't apply CP-UDP concept on the whole territory, the whole urban space, their efficiency would be much, much lower. And that's another important, the different assessment, the different evaluations must dialogue by themselves, among themselves. So I think the time is running, so I would like to show you what is the probably biggest projects of redesign of a neighborhood using CP-UDP criteria. This is a neighborhood called La Douchère in Lyon, It's typical development from the 60s, so high-rise buildings, hard construction, a lot of 17 floors with the commercial gallery at the ground level. Very, of course, at that time it was important to give a home to everyone. So according to the rationalism, the rational theories, this was the machine to live, like Le Corbusier said. And the neighborhood is in a beautiful part of the city, up on a cliff, so with a nice view of Lyon. But it was characterized by high security problem, and especially perception of insecurity and safety. Here you can see another view, so you can imagine you cannot even understand where you live. And if we go back and look at the concept of James Jacobs, like territoriality, sense of possess, spontaneous control, and that this is made to deny all of this. This is the plan of the original situation. I don't know how many architects are there, but even if you're not an architect, you can see the high-rise building and the commercial part in the middle. And the idea was to redesign the area for following CP-UDP criteria, but not to with a lower density. The same people living there were moved during the reconstruction and then moved back. And a little extra person in a private owned building were put in, together with extra services and public spaces. So this is the new situation. Here we can compare them. So you can see how the layout of streets is totally different, and it is designed according to CP-UDP planning concepts. That means more possibility to change your routes, high density, but different buildings. I don't have time now to introduce all the principles of CP-UDP. Anyway, the result was you can see the first phase of demolition, and this is the new La Duchère. A totally different city with the same people than before, and some strategic decisions like the one of maintaining by the city the ownership of all the ground floors. So the city can decide which kind of activities can be introduced at ground floor, so they can avoid let's say danger activities. You can imagine which of them. And the result is that you cannot see the difference between public housing and private housing. These are public housings, and crime rate fall down rapidly because people living in a better environment and with more possibility to take care, because they recognize that the space belongs to themselves, changed their attitude to their own neighborhood. Of course, this is very difficult experiment to reproduce, because as you can imagine, the French government had to spend quite a lot of money, and I mean that the price of the renovation was little more than 1 billion euros. So, but in only 4 years it was implemented and it was changed. So I hope that this rapid overview of CP-UDP was useful to make you curious, or maybe many of you might already have known this. And if you have questions, now I give the floor to David, I think, and thank you for your attention.
Hello, good afternoon. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Welcome to the presentation for Greater Manchester Police and Design for Security and their toolkit and their involvement with the CCI project over the last 2 years. My name is David Marr. I'm an architectural consultant within Design for Security. I've been working there for the past 4 and a bit years. Prior to that, I worked as an architectural designer within industry for approximately about 15, 18 years. I should know the exact details of it, but hey ho. So this afternoon, I'm going to run through the toolkit that we are presenting this afternoon for the CCI project, which is a toolkit designed specifically and supports design for security, and will hopefully take us into the next generation of our working life. So I'll run through this for now. So I'll give you Umberto has provided us with a very brief potted history of design for security. We are a bunch of merry men and women who are specific sort of built environment specialists. We all come from a different background, so we've got a couple of architects, some planners, a landscape architect, and an urban designer. And we offer crime prevention to all new major planning applications across Greater Manchester. We are a unique service within the UK, within UK policing. And that's because we are the only force that offers this service where we provide professional built environment specialists to offer the crime prevention advice. We have been in this capacity probably from the early 2000s, and I think officially Design for Security was established around about 2005, 2006. So within the CCI project, we have identified a number of gaps within the service that we provide. And the way we work is that we, as a team, we meet on a weekly basis on a Tuesday morning, and we discuss the workload of each team member. There are 5 built environment consultants, and we have a crime analyst, and we have support staff as well. And we discuss each individual's work across many months, and we do that via an Excel spreadsheet, which is very limiting in terms of the information that we can glean out of that spreadsheet. So it only provides limited bits of information about individual projects, and it gives us as a team a little bit of an indication about where we are working as a team and what each individual consultant is up to. The second area of sort of concern with the project identified is that we are operating on an aging IT portal system where all our information is stored, and we've got a number of years within this portal where we've got historic projects housed. And as GMP moves into a new age where we are updating all our IT system, this is a perfect opportunity to develop a new system that will promote and develop design for security within Greater Manchester Police. One of the other areas that we've discovered that is a problem for design for security is we've got a number of occasions where we've had the repetition of project work within the team. And what that means is one consultant might have worked on a project over 5, 10 years ago, and that project has come back, or the site has come back into the office as an application but not always, the project isn't always passed on to the same consultant. And the team of consultants within Design for Security has been working there for many years. So it's highly likely that one of the consultants will have worked on this project before, but if it's passed on to a new consultant, then some of the intrinsic knowledge about that site might not necessarily be passed on to the new consultant. So like I've said, Design for Security is a small team within the much wider family of Greater Manchester Police. And it's not always understood by our senior leaders and our local policing teams, the work that we undertake within Design for Security and how that can have an influence on future policing methods and resourcing of specific areas and new and emerging communities within Greater Manchester. One of the other major gaps within our service is because of the workload that comes into Design for Security. It's very rare that we have an opportunity to evaluate the impact of the service that we provide. So we don't necessarily understand how successful the recommendations that we've put forward within our reports, how successful that is taken on, it is actually working within that new environment, within that built environment. So it's important that we do have a tool that will allow us to evaluate and take a breather and retrospective review of the work that we do in order to move forward to make sure that we are providing the best advice. So a very brief case study that I undertook about 3 years ago to highlight this issue. It's a small area in Greengate in Salford, which is next to the city centre of Manchester. And this is a new and emerging community which has been under development for approximately about 15 years. And it's a residential-led mixed-use area which also incorporates commercial office space, leisure facilities. And there are a number of tall, high-density residential apartment schemes which house individual amenities within those spaces. So you might have rooftop restaurants, gyms or cinema rooms, laundry facilities within a number of these buildings. And what I did is I looked at sort of the workload that Design for Security has undertaken across this area, and it's a very small area. It's less than a squared mile. And the number of projects that we've been involved in is in the region of 11 plus projects. And if we look at the residential breakdown of each of these buildings, we can estimate a total figure of anything between 5 and maybe 8,000 people will be living within this small area within the next 5 years. If not already, there are already a number of these developments that have been completed, but work is still continuing. So we've got a huge amount of people living, also working within this area, and this will have a knock-on effect on future policing demand, at which our local policing teams aren't necessarily aware of these major developments coming forward. So it doesn't support the future resourcing and future understanding of what's coming down the line within this area. So part of the solution and the key ideas for the toolkit is that it's quite selfishly, it's a tool that's designed specifically for Design for Security, which will enable us to visualize a much richer picture of how the development of certain areas and how Greater Manchester is developing from a built environment point of view. It will also support the early stage intervention, which we promote within Design for Security when we're communicating with and dealing with applications from architects and developers. So it's important that we promote that idea of providing crime prevention at an early stage before the development goes through the planning process. We'll also be able to, with the toolkit, is implement and integrate much more detailed database of each of these individual projects. So it will provide much more detail about individual projects and their densities and what amenities are being housed within these projects and communities. And it will support a greater collaboration within GMP and across our local authority partners, so that we can all understand together the implication of future development hotspots around Greater Manchester and how they might be resourced from a policing point of view. So further elements of the ProMIS toolkit is, again, like I've said, it's a system for Design for Security, which will allow us to undertake a much more visual analysis of the projects that we are working on across the week and across Greater Manchester. And it will also incorporate the geographical picture, which will be a much user-friendly tool as opposed to the Excel spreadsheet. And ultimately, it will measure the impact, or we'll be able to measure the impact of the recommendations that we've provided over the course of the project, which I'll come to later on. So the toolkit in itself, as I've stated, we will be able to use this at any time across the week, but mainly for our team meetings. Again, when we all gather on a Tuesday, we will be able to review each individual project and each individual consultant's workload and understand visually where those projects are. So that might then provide information to another consultant who might have a project in the local area to somebody else's project, so that you could share, we can share information across projects. We'll also be looking to create a much more detailed database of each individual project and the local risk features that are involved. As consultants, we go out and undertake a site survey before the development takes place. So that gives us an understanding of what's happening within the area. And some of those key features we can then cross-analyze against the crime data that we've got. So some of those local risk features might be a bus stop, an alleyway, an ATM machine, or a local pub. And these could be crime hotspots for the future development that's taking place. So it's important that we understand and register where these local risk features might be. Another key feature of the toolkit will be a project timeline, so that we can indicate and understand when crime prevention was first sought and first discussed with the architects and the developers, with ourselves. And we can also build in future alarms, so that we can indicate post the construction of the development, so maybe a year or 2 years down the line, that we undertake within DFS a retrospective review of the crime data, so that we can analyse whether the recommendations that we hopefully have provided, so that the crime data in theory should have gone down because of the recommendations that we've provided, or are there other reasons why the area might not be successful. And it's also important to register and acknowledge the secure by design achievement that has been achieved by the individual project, whether that's a gold, silver or bronze award, depending on the recommendations that we've discussed with the development team. So this is a slide that gives you an indication of how this toolkit will be viewed by the team members. So we will be able to, some of the graphs will give us a financial picture, as well as application data on the various work streams that DFS undertake. So we review crime impact statements, that's our main body of work. We analyse and offer advice and support for all planning applications across Greater Manchester, and consultations. So again, these graphs will be able to show where a lot of our work is focusing at any period of time across Greater Manchester. So there might be an area, a borough within Greater Manchester that has got a lot of development taking place across a certain year. So we can then extrapolate that information and understand that in about five years' time, there is an area that might need police resourcing, or we can communicate that to our local policing teams that there is a development hotspot taking place. Therefore, there might be a future crime trend within those areas. So the toolkit will be able to build up a rich picture of each individual project. So it will house information on the use types within the project, whether it's going to be a residential project, are there going to be amenities for the residents within that area, private garden space, car parking facilities, cinema rooms, restaurants. Is it going to be an office development? Are they going to have amenity spaces? We'll also be able to incorporate the detail of dwelling numbers, which will be able to estimate number of residents within areas. Again, the important factor is GIS mapping, so we can review the developments taking place across Greater Manchester from a visual analysis. And we'll be able to understand the growth and development of areas and communities again. So that has that gives us the ability to communicate with our local policing teams and senior leaders, that we understand the development that's taking place across Greater Manchester, and how that will impact on current and future policing resourcing needs. So again, this slide gives you an indication of how the toolkit will be able to view within the team. So each project will have its own initial summary card, and then you'll be able to click each of those cards, and it will throw up some more detailed information, project summary, crime summary information, crime analysis details, and the local risk features that I talked about, so that we can, when we're discussing within our weekly team meetings or at any other time, we can review projects to understand what's actually involved within each project. So as a time and motion study, we don't have to go into various different files and try and extrapolate all this data. This will all be inputted from the very beginning, so each individual team member can review a project card and understand the detail of this project. So again, the toolkit will offer not only individual consultant members the ability to use this tool for their own needs, but it also will help the business development of design for security to understand the cycles of construction and development and applications that are coming into us across a monthly or annual basis. So we can understand how DFS is functioning as a business and when there are peaks and troughs across the calendar. So it's estimated that that the ProMIS toolkit will be hopefully delivered across 2 phases. Phase 1 will ultimately be used for and by the Design for Security team, which will help us migrate from the Excel spreadsheet to this ProMIS toolkit. And we'll be able to visualize these projects and identify where development hotspots are taking place. Phase 2 will be, again, we'll be able to identify these development hotspots, but it will provide this visual communication aid between design for security and our local policing teams. And it will also chart the progress of crime prevention and the CPTED strands that we adhere to and recommend across projects. Ultimately, as GMP moves into this new IT phase, it shows that this toolkit will be a flexible system so that we can take this anywhere. We'll be able to have a conversation with our local authority partners, our local policing teams, and sit down and we'll be able to highlight specific authorities within Greater Manchester, of which there are 10. We'll be able to see and show where we have had an influence and show where there are development hotspots across Greater Manchester and how DFS is making recommendations and learning from the review process and the retrospective review of projects over the years, and where we can learn and make further steps and hopefully make a safer built environment. So ultimately, the Design for Security toolkit, again, will be a partnership toolkit used essentially by DFS, but it will be a communication tool where we can communicate with our local policing teams and our 10 local authority partners and build a better relationship for both all these different areas. And as I've referred to, it ultimately will have an impact on the review and of the recommendations that Design for Security provides, and it will allow us to evolve and move into a much more open and safer environment. So thank you for listening, and I hand you back to Margot, who will take you through if you've got any questions.
Thank you, David and Umberto, for your presentations. Umberto, you walked us through the principles of CP-UDP, the history of design for security, and demonstrated how effectively CP-UDP can be and should be used by law enforcement, architectural designers, in cooperation with local city planners and developers to ensure safe urban spaces. And David, you introduced the ProMIS tool to us, a system designed for use by the Design for Security consultancy services at GMP. And I think this tool really demonstrates how DFS is at the forefront of best practice in the field of urban crime prevention. So in the interest of time management, I'm going to jump straight into some questions from our attendees. So I have a question for Umberto. Do you see the value in performing a crime impact assessment for any size or type of project? For example, public versus private, large or small? And what are the potential challenges with performing this kind of assessment?
Yes, well, of course, I see the value, because otherwise I wouldn't have been doing it for the last 25 years. And the importance of having assessment in the whole territory is linked to the fact that if we have spots of blindness, spots where no assessment have been done, they will influence all the surroundings. So the largest part possible of territory has to be covered in order to have a good interaction between the different projects. And the challenges are mostly what I explained in the presentation. Currently, we are suffering I always say a lack of competition. If I look at the Italian situation, we are the only research lab, the only in activity supporting this kind of theories. And so when you have no competitors, that means that things are not working yet.
Thanks, Umberto. So, David, how transferable do you think the ProMIS tool or elements of the tool is to other police forces or agencies?
I think it's incredibly transferable because the toolkit is specifically designed, like I said, for now for design for security, but that's it doesn't halt anybody and any other force from taking this and being able to use it for their specific region. I think it's incredibly transferable, and it's a great tool for being able to, like I've said, retrospectively review the projects that we've been involved with and each force has been involved with.
So we've got another question about the ProMIS tool. It seems very dependent on police crime data. Do you use other data sources?
Well, we undertake site visits, so prior to going through the crime data, we understand and go out and do a site survey to try and extrapolate and understand what's going on within that specific area. Seems we've lost some.
I think that Dagmar has disconnected, right?
Yes, I think we lost Dagmar, so I'll jump in and directly hand over to maybe one last question because we're running out of time, unfortunately. Maybe one last question from an attendee. He wrote, I know that Manchester City Council were closely involved in the development of the CIS. Has it been difficult to get other GM, I think Greater Manchester, local authorities on board and keeping local planners on board with the CIS over time?
Well, every authority within Greater Manchester has a relationship with us, and it's not always the case that every authority sends application in our direction, and hopefully through the toolkit we'll be able to identify where there are opportunities for greater interaction with other authorities that aren't talking to us a huge amount or sending us projects.
Okay. And another question. Hi, Dagmar. I would say just closing this again, but good to have you back. Just one last short question, a more general one. Could the design of private and public spaces favor, disadvantages, or much worse, physically prevent the practice of neighborhood watch, which has proved very effective in reducing street crime where it has been implemented? So not sure if this complex question is maybe it's more a comment as well. Not sure if you have a comment on this for 1 minute.
Well, I see who is, no, sorry, David, because I see who is the question from, Leonardo. And David, if you want to answer, because I can talk with Leonardo personally.
Well, I think the work that we undertake promotes the work of CPTED, and one of those areas is promoting natural surveillance from new developments across communities. So I think that the toolkit that we're developing, I think it's a more general question, not necessarily about toolkit. The work that we undertake promotes the work of and the theory of CPTED. So yeah, unless Umberto's got anything further to add.
I would say the same. I mean, all our studies start from the idea of network surveillance and spontaneous surveillance. So it's true that if we allow people to be more sensible about the space and what's happening into their surrounding space, it will be much easier to implement the right sensibility for neighbor watch. By the way, in Italy, we developed neighbor watch in the last years, thanks to mainly to Leonardo Campanale, and it was something new, because in Italy, neighbor watch was something that was in the blood of people. We had people standing in the streets, old people playing cards outside the doors, and we lost all of this with the new kind of developments. And now we have to reintroduce by training people to do what they old grandfathers and grandmothers used to do spontaneously, because the space is not encouraging this kind of practices. So we have to think better spaces and to retrain people to take care of their public spaces.
Okay, so Dagmar, if you agree, I would come to the end and would just like to do some closing remarks. So thanks to all of you. Thanks for attending. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for moderating, Dagmar, and of course, David and Umberto. Thank you for these interesting presentations. As I said, some closing remarks. You, the attendees, will receive a follow-up mail in a few days with the recording of this webinar and also the presentations, if the speakers agree. And I would like to draw your attention to our next CCI-related events. So at first, the last CCI webinar in our series. It will take place in December. Currently, we are planning for the 14th of December, but you will receive further info and confirmation on that in the follow-up mail to this webinar. And since this is the last webinar in this series, it will be something very special. So we will do both a review of the project and an outlook on what will happen with the project results and tools. So I invite you to participate. But before, we have our final conference of the CCI project. It will take place on the 24th and the 25th of November in Brussels, and we have very interesting keynote speakers. All the tools developed in the project will be presented again. We have workshops, we have an exhibition, and much more. So you can still register on the CCI website, and I'm looking forward to seeing many of you there. Thank you very much, and see you all next time. Thank you.